Well, good day. I'm here with my old friend Larry Gambone. This is Kevin Annett. And we're here to talk about, well, our two books. These are kind of biographical works about what it's been like being an unrepentant free radical for the last 40 or 50 years. So,
you know what free radicals do, right?
tell us what free radicals do.
Go ahead, Kevin. Continue.
Well, don't they speed up chemical processes
Yes.
in the body to allow change? Well, that's us, I guess.
Yeah.
People often ask me, like, what keeps you going? And I'm always wanting to meet up and get the story of people who have held on to their principles. And how do they do it? Like, just one thing I was impressed about in your book was you had a description. I just want to read it because it really was good. This is about a protest you were doing where you were going to hit the U.S. consulate in Vancouver. And you say, a sensation struck me as we ran down the street that I never felt before. Talking it over with others, I was not alone in this. There was a feeling of elation, a kind of high or an epiphany. For the first time, and only for that brief moment, I was totally in control of my life. And with all my comrades around me for that instant, we believed we could accomplish anything we desired. As long as I live, I'll never forget that moment. This must have been a brief taste of the sensation one has during a revolution when the old regime is finally toppling. And it's almost like we live for those moments, right? But
Yeah, well, it is a kind of spiritual thing, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, what's kept me going through the years is I think you have to actually backtrack and think of what makes you this way.
Yeah.
And what makes you this way, I think your moral compass, your moral or ethical compass, is set very early in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably set as a teenager. And, for example, if you have an ethical stance towards life, if you have empathy towards other people, you will carry that. If you're empathetic at 18, you're going to be empathetic at 80. If you're a narcissist at 18, you're going to be a narcissist.
Well,
at
you know
80.
what? You're an optimist.
Yeah.
I have a brother who's used to have principles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he used to be pretty good. Now he's a corporate CEO in San Francisco. He's in with a biotech firm. It's like he has a total 180 degree turnaround from when I knew him in his 20s. And so not everybody does hang on to their principles.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. There is these changes that happen. People make choices. And I want to, well, let's start with your life. Like, I know that we met
Mm-hmm.
in 1973, I believe.
74.
74. I know it was right after the coup in Chile.
Yeah.
And we met in Vancouver at the Chile Solidarity Committee meetings, I think.
Yes.
Memory serves.
Yeah.
And you'd been involved, of course, in politics since the 60s. I was a neophyte then. I got on board in 73, but you had been around. Tell us a bit about what you've been involved in.
I've been around since 65 with the Comox project. That was civil disobedience against the imposition of nuclear weapons in Canada at the Comox Air Base, and a bunch of people from across Canada set up a summer-long program which culminated in civil disobedience, blocking all the gates of the base for 32 hours.
Awesome.
So that was my very first. My very first act was an act of civil disobedience,
right,
which I could have been dragged away and arrested. But only a few people were dragged away and arrested at the main gates, but I was at a secondary gate, so they left us alone. But it was still quite something.
I'm going to dig around and post on this film we're doing images of us, pictures of us in the 70s, because we look quite different. I mean, you had quite a long hair, so did I.
Yeah.
And I'm also reflecting how, we were involved also during the 80s. You were involved in the Solidarity Strike. I don't know, I didn't think we met up then. I was out at UBC then studying law.
You were studying at UBC, but I seem to remember you still doing a shift at Spartacus Books.
That's right. That's another place we met.
That's where I would run into you at Spartacus Books.
Right, at that time,
Yeah.
That was also another amazing experience, the Solidarity General Strike that happened for how many days until it was called off?
Yeah, definitely. That could have been a turning point, but they made sure that it wasn't.
Well, that's the thing, often, when people talk about sellouts, and, these things routinely happen, but I often say, well, it's not so much the system that's the problem, because we know the nature of the system. It's all these people who put their trust in a few so-called leaders. And that's why I've always been kind of a gut-level anarchist like you, because it's not a matter of leaders, it's a matter of making ourselves our own leaders and having the confidence to carry on. So, I mean, at a time like that, you see that. I mean, I was amazed that 80,000 people would suddenly go back to work because one labor leader tells them to, right?
Well, the thing is, my experiences in the 60s and 70s were all of grassroots kinds of things.
Yeah.
And any leadership that we had was ad hoc.
Yeah.
So it was a very informal kind of process going on. So for me, it wasn't a matter of looking towards, say, the labor leaders or the heads of the NDP that these somehow were going to lead us to the New Jerusalem or something.
Yeah.
I and all the people around me realized that we had to do it ourselves, and I think this in and of itself is something that helps you maintain your radicalism, because you know that the leaders, so-called, are going to have to compromise. The nature of the system, they're going to have to compromise, and so you're not going to give all your faith to them. So you're not going to be heartbroken by the fact that the NDP doesn't usher in socialism, or that the BC Federation of Labour does not push for a general strike, which could have reversed the austerity measures of the Socrates government. So you've got a foundation there in a kind of reality that you don't have if you're looking towards all this leadership.
Right. So in other words, hold on to your own principles.
Yeah.
Stay independent.
Yeah.
You don't make any kind of permanent arrangement that's going to sell out your power, in other words. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's something really important for the generation now, because, we lived before computers, before iPads. I mean, we used things like telephones and leaflets.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a time when you'd put up a poster and 50 or 100 people would just show up from it. And it's kind of hard to imagine that now. It's like, it's a different time in that sense now.
It's very different. It's, in some ways, it's a lot easier today because the access to information. Like, it took me a very long time to work my way into anarchism, because it was so difficult to have access to materials. I mean, I was lucky that I had the Simon Fraser Library, but I didn't actually delve into those books until I had there was some kind of anarchist presence, that I was actually aware that the movement existed. But whereas today, I mean,
instantly.
Yeah, you got just Google and there it is,
Well,
so in that sense, it's a lot easier. But in another sense, I would say it's also more difficult, because it's too fluid in some ways.
How do you mean fluid?
Well, it sort of comes and goes. It's I mean, there's an awful lot of effort in cyberspace, rather than actually on the ground.
Exactly, and that's the bone I have to pick too about now. People are so flooded with information that nothing's a priority anymore. How do we pick and choose? How do we focus and devote ourselves to something, right? That's something I really see missing now.
Yeah, and like I say, you've got, there's a tendency to use social media becomes the revolution.
McLuhan, hey?
Yeah, well, no, I don't, that's not good, because you got to be out in the street, you got to be organizing, you got to have civil disobedience. Sometimes you even got to have riots and break windows and shit like that, because this is how changes occur. Changes are not going to occur in cyberspace. I mean, it helps change consciousness.
I'm going to quote you. Changes not occur in cyberspace, exactly.
It helps change consciousness, but the actual real changes have to be in the streets, in the communities, in the workplaces, this sort of thing.
Well, that leads into another thing I want to talk about, the climate now compared to when we were growing up. I mean, we are living, if somebody told me 30 years ago the conditions now, I would think, well, we're in the police state then, right? Mm-hmm. Cameras on everybody, constant surveillance, a state an economy that runs according to total criminality and fraud at every level. Do you think that has something to do with the way people have changed, or what?
Well, I'm just thinking back to in the '60s. We were always saying, "Oh, everything is fascism," right? You know, but I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't know the half of it, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, the stuff we did back then, you would have been killed. You'd be killed today.
Like for what, for example?
Well, when we crossed the border into Blaine, 600 people, and went and trashed Blaine, well, they'd just shoot us now.
Tell about that. That was after the U.S. invasion of Cambodia in
Yeah,
1970, right?
well, the Yippies and the VLF were a kind of Marxist-Leninist youth group. We were allies, and we decided that we would hold a demonstration at the border. And we proclaimed that because Nixon had sent troops in 22 miles into Cambodia, we were going to march 22 miles into the United States. Of course, it was all just a lot of hot air, right?
Well, you did it, though. You went in
Yeah, but the thing
kind of
is,
spontaneously.
we got there,
Yeah.
and then people realized there's only 2 border guards.
Let's go.
So
you invaded Blaine.
yeah, we invaded Blaine, and some windows got broken, some flags taken down. There were a few contracts with some of the local rednecks, but that was it. You know, I mean, today I can't.
You'd be shot and tasered
Oh.
and locked up for 20 years.
I can't imagine something like that occurring today.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, at the time we thought we were living under utter fascism.
Yeah.
Little did we know, right? I mean, today. I regard neoliberalism as the third form of totalitarianism after fascism and Stalinism.
Mhm.
But it's a soft form of totalitarianism. You can hand out your little, well, I was going to say mimeograph, that kind of dates me, but photocopied leaflets.
Right.
You can have your little blogs, you can have your little discussion groups, as long as you don't do anything.
Exactly. And then,
You do something, man, you're in trouble. You're in deep shit.
and you know, the trouble I have now, Larry, is that people, activists today, equate learning information with doing something.
Mhm.
They're sitting there getting this information from the laptop and think, "Oh, I'm informed now. I've done something," and that's a first step.
Mhm.
Total first step.
Definitely the first step.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. It's got to be action. It's got to be action. And the thing is, how you really learn. This is something that's important because a lot of the old left groups, you know, they were like schools.
Right.
They would educate people. They would have classes in how to be a Marxist and stuff like this. But you know how you really learn? You learn by doing.
It's the action.
And that was the secret of the New Left and of the anarchist movement, is that people learn by actually getting out and doing things. You'd be some little liberal, I don't really like the Vietnam War. So you go out to a demonstration. And in those days, of course, you weren't going to get bonked on the head. But what you'd read is a lot of insults in the newspaper, a lot of lies. So you'd read these lies in the newspaper, and you'd be outraged.
Start waking up.
And you'd be outraged, and so that would transform your conscience. You'd become radicalized by that. And of course, today you go to a demonstration, you get the shit beat out of you, or your your friends get the shit beat out of you. So I mean that's like gasoline on a little campfire, right?
Yeah, yeah.
For sure.
Well, I like what you said too about the thing at Blaine at the border was kind of spontaneous. Someone just decided, let's go across the border. I've had those same experiences, like the times we occupied those Catholic churches in downtown Vancouver. Me and a bunch of Indians, somebody just said, look, there's no cops, let's go in.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another, and that's how revolution and change happens. It grows. It's like a mushrooming phenomena, and you can't predict it. You can't plan it beforehand. But you learn in one moment like that what you learn in 3 weeks of reading a book somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, nothing is really spontaneous because it's all seeded beforehand by various actions and learning processes. But then it's like a chemical reaction. You've got a beaker full of salt.
Yeah.
It's in liquid form, and then you drop a little tiny crystalline.
Right.
All crystallizes. That's what happens.
Yeah.
That's what happens in a moment like that.
It's about continuity too, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
why it's good to be a veteran, because you have all this experience and we've got to link up with the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they won't listen to us, but at least there's a history there which they need to know about.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to hear about this in a book somewhere, right?
Oh no,
Most of the time.
this will not be taught. The thing is, if you teach the truth in school, that is known as being ideological.
Mm.
If you teach the dominant mythology, well, that's That's fine.
Just proper education.
Yeah, that's education. But God help you if you try to teach the truth. I mean, if you had a real education system, you'd have young people would learn about this. They would learn how the women's movement came about. They'd learn about how the trade union movement came about. They would learn about the anti-war movement and the counterculture and the effect this had on millions of people.
Yeah.
You would learn about this stuff, but you don't.
Tell me why. We'll talk a little bit about our books.
Yeah.
Tell me why you wrote No Regrets.
Well, there was a book published in Vancouver purportedly about the counterculture, and I didn't like it. I thought it was a very poor job. I'm not going to mention the name, the author, or the title. I just thought it wasn't very good. A friend of mine, Ron Sokolsky, has a magazine called Oyster Catcher, and he said, you know, write a critique of it. So I did. And then I went around to my friends and I said, you know, somebody's got to write a real book about what we were doing, what was happening with the anarchist movement and the counterculture in the 60s and 70s. You know, so I went around to my various friends who themselves are journalists or historians or you know, people like that. They said, well, you know, I'm working on this book, and no, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So I said, okay, if you're not going to do it, I'll do it.
Right.
So then I thought, well, you know, to do an academic exercise, it's going to take me years and years and years, just years anyway, but it's going to take me an awful lot of effort. So what I'm going to do is I'll simply I'll use my own biography as a template to discuss all this stuff. I'll only talk about stuff that I was either there or my close friends told me about. So there's nothing in the book that you know, that I'm not somehow involved with. So it's from a personal angle.
Well, somebody once said history is all biography anyway.
Yeah.
It's all about somebody's story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a good picture of you there on the front cover. Cool dude there in shades.
Yeah.
So if you had could go back and give him a message, what would it be?
Give him a message?
Yeah, if you could go back in time and talk to him when was that picture taken?
67. It would be the January 1967.
Yeah.
Well, if I could go back and tell that dude, you know what I'd tell him? Get therapy!
Why?
Well, you know, authoritarian parenting and authoritarian pedagogy, it does stuff to you. You know, it does stuff to you. It takes a long time to overcome that.
I think we all spend our whole life overcoming it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe at the same time that fuels our radicalism because we don't like authority figures.
Oh no, I've often thought, you know, back in those days, a lot of young working class guys go join the police force or the military, and it never entered my mind. Actually, when I was like 14 years old, my career options were two. I was either going to become an archaeologist or a beatnik.
Yeah, I wanted to be an archaeologist too.
Yeah.
Small world,
Yeah.
Why digging in the past? What is it about digging in the past that's important, you think?
Well, I found it utterly fascinating because I wanted to know why things were the way they were.
Right.
So I found archaeology very interesting for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
I never became an archaeologist. I became a beatnik instead. But at least I had the two career options, right? But never would I ever even consider the military or the police because I had enough of bullying in school. I didn't want more of it, right?
You didn't want to be a goon yourself. Huh?
No, I didn't want to be a goon myself, and I know that to be trained, you get kicked around too, right?
Well, yeah, but it's interesting because the reaction of a lot of people when they're abused is to say, it's not even conscious, they automatically become an abuser.
Yeah. And
that's their way of venting it, of dealing with their own inner stuff, right?
I don't know why. I did engage in a little bit of abuse when I was in, because you get picked on, so you pick on the one that's weaker than you. But I didn't do very much of that. I guess I had more empathy or something. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to what's inside us, right?
Yeah.
And what moves us to be radicals is a vision of a better world, a newer world, where people aren't getting oppressed.
Yeah. Like, I never had a desire to be rich or dominate anybody or rule over anybody. I basically just wanted to be left alone and do the things that interested me and be surrounded by people who are doing those same things and not have them be bothered.
Right.
I suppose if the system hadn't been so blindly stupid and oppressive and just give us a little corner of the world and let us do our thing, I would have probably just been happy with that. But they were too stupid to do that. So, they had to beat on us.
Well, I know for me, I could never tolerate seeing somebody getting beaten up by somebody else. I mean, not just beaten up, but used in any way. And I couldn't sleep at nights. I felt it was being done to me. And I think it's that empathy that motivates true revolutionaries.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, isn't Che Guevara said that revolution is revolutionary consciousness based on love or something? This is an approximation, right?
Right, something like that.
Something like that.
And one of I can't remember who in Russia said it, but the famous comment they were asked to analyze Stalin, and they said, well, he wasn't moved so much by love of the oppressed as hatred of somebody, and it's that all-consuming hatred that can lead to. Well, don't put that person in power, whatever you do. Right?
Yeah, right. Well, that's it. As we know, Stalin, like Hitler, was terribly abused as a child. So he had within him all this rage. And if you put a person like that with an all-consuming rage and power, that's what you get.
Absolutely. I think that's why people distrust the whole idea of revolution.
Yeah.
Because you can say, well, what new leader are you going to put in power?
Yeah.
And we say, well, no, it's about everybody taking power. It's about getting rid of power.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
So that's what's driven you and me both for many decades.
Yeah.
And do you feel alone now?
No. I still have all my friends from that time period, and they're all, if they're not active, they are at least supportive of what's going on. I'm lucky to say that I don't know anybody from that time period who actually betrayed us, other than the obvious cop infiltrators, the obvious cop infiltrators.
That's a really interesting thing, Larry, because it shows you how solid the relationships were back then. It wasn't based on iPads, it was based on real contact. You know somebody's going to cover your back when they're there with you, right? And you go through the same
like
struggles.
My friends go back almost 50 years now.
That's awesome.
So I mean, and we've all stayed in contact, and we're still friends, and I gather younger, newer friends, and it's the same sort of thing, right? People stay solid. Yeah.
Well, this is part one in an ongoing series, but just to remind folks, the books are No Regrets. Is that Black Hat Press?
Yes.
And of course, Unrelenting, Between Sodom and Zion, through Amazon.
Yeah.
And we'll carry this on. Thank you, brother.
Okay.
All right.
Very good.